The Korean Mafia boss wanted my sister, but married me instead. What happened next changed everything. The white hanbok felt like a shroud around my body, impossibly heavy despite the delicate silk. Traditional brides are supposed to feel honored wearing such finery. The intricate embroidery, the ceremonial colors that my mother spent months selecting. But as I stared at my reflection, all I could see was a funeral mask where my face should have been. Not my funeral, but the death of the woman I thought I would become. I wasn't supposed to be here. 3 weeks ago, I'd overheard them, my father and Kim Jae-wook, the most feared man in Seoul's underground. The conversation replays in my nightmares. My father's study door left slightly ajar, their voices carrying into the hallway where I stood frozen, clutching university admission papers for my sister. "I understand your position," Jae-wook had said, his deep voice controlled and cold. "Family traditions must be respected. I'll marry Sumin as agreed. The alliance between our families is too valuable to jeopardize over personal preferences." My father's response was apologetic but firm. "Hygiene is only 20. Too young, Jae-wook. You know our ways. The eldest daughter must marry first. How convenient that tradition forces me to take the wrong sister. The wrong sister." The words carved themselves into my chest, permanent and scarring. I'd stood there, my breath trapped in my lungs, as they continued discussing me like a disappointing business acquisition. The papers for hygiene had slipped from my fingers, scattering across the marble floor. Neither man heard. In that moment, something inside me crystallized. The dutiful daughter who had excelled at university, who had earned her MBA with honors, who had believed her intelligence might someday matter more than her marriageability. That woman died in the hallway outside my father's study. Everyone calls my sister the beautiful one. Hygiene with her perfect features and gentle manner. Hygiene who turns heads whenever she enters a room. I've spent my life being the practical one, the smart one, the one who helped manage family accounts while Hygiene learned the traditional arts meant to make her the perfect wife for a powerful man. Apparently, Kim Jae-wook had noticed, and apparently he had wanted her instead of me. But tradition dictated otherwise. And in families like ours, families with connections to the Jopik, the Korean underground that controls everything from nightclubs to shipping routes along the eastern seaboard, tradition might as well be law. So I became the bride of Seoul's most dangerous man, knowing he wished I were someone else. The wedding ceremony was a grotesque display of power disguised as tradition. 200 guests filled the hall. Politicians who owed my father favors, business owners who needed Jae-wook's protection, foreign investors whose money flowed through the legitimate businesses that fronted darker operations. Everyone bowing, everyone smiling, everyone pretending this union was blessed by anything other than strategic necessity. I performed my part perfectly. Years of training in proper behavior made my responses automatic. I bowed at the right moments. I poured tea with graceful precision. I accepted blessings from elders whose hands were stained with invisible blood money. The paybeak ceremony felt like a mockery, catching dates and chestnuts in my skirt to predict our children, as though either of us wanted a family born from this cold arrangement. I smiled and nodded as old women whispered that strong sons would follow, that my womb would fulfill its purpose. I wanted to scream that I had other purposes. My mind, my education, my ambitions that had nothing to do with being a vessel for the next generation of criminals. When Jae-wook lifted my ceremonial veil, his eyes were flat and unreadable. Up close, he was even more imposing. Broad shoulders beneath his traditional attire, strong jawline, features that would be handsome if they weren't so coldly perfect. At 35, he had built an empire that made even my father tread carefully. And I was just another acquisition. Our first night together in his Gangnam penthouse was a negotiation neither of us had anticipated. The bedroom was larger than my entire university apartment, designed in sleek minimalism that spoke of wealth without ostentation. The floor-to-ceiling windows displayed Seoul like a glittering offering at our feet. "I know what you heard that day in your father's study," he said without preamble, loosening his tie with practiced efficiency. "I can see it in your eyes every time you look at me." I refused to show weakness. Then we understand each other perfectly. This is a business arrangement, nothing more. Is that what you want, Sumin? A marriage that exists only on paper. What I wanted was irrelevant. What I wanted had never mattered. But I wouldn't give him the satisfaction of saying so. What I want is clarity, I told him. I won't pretend this is a love match. I won't pretend you aren't wishing I were my sister. Something dangerous flickered behind his eyes. You know nothing about what I wish. That night established the pattern of our marriage. Cold civility in public, tense distance in private. The physical aspect was something else entirely. A battle of wills where neither of us would admit defeat, where pleasure became another form of power, another way to prove we weren't affected by each other. I told myself it meant nothing, that the way my body responded to his touch was merely biology, not betrayal. That I could separate physical sensation from emotional connection. But in the darkness, when his hands moved with unexpected gentleness, when his mouth found places that made me forget my resentment momentarily, the lines blurred in ways that left me confused and angry, mostly at myself. Morning would bring renewed distance, separate routines carefully choreographed to minimize interaction. He would leave early for his office in Uedo, that gleaming tower of glass and steel that housed his legitimate businesses. I would remain in the penthouse, a prisoner in luxury, watched by security personnel who called me Madame, with perfect respect while monitoring my every move. Jae-wook's world was immediately overwhelming. The penthouse was just one property among many. His business holdings spanned legitimate enterprises, tech companies, luxury hotels, import-export, and operations I pretended not to know about. His security team followed us everywhere, silent men with concealed weapons and earpieces who materialized whenever we left the building. I was a prisoner in a gilded cage, trapped by marriage vows that felt like shackles. His family was worse than I'd imagined. His mother, a traditional woman who had survived the hardships that forged her son into steel, evaluated me with cold precision. At our first family dinner, she commented on everything. My posture, my pouring technique, my clothing choices. Each observation was a thinly veiled criticism. The jeongjang is poured with both hands, Sumina, she corrected as I served tea. Did your mother not teach you proper respect? I bit my tongue and adjusted my technique, feeling my fingers tremble slightly under her scrutiny. The formal dinner stretched endlessly. 12 traditional courses served in my mother-in-law's Hanamdong mansion, where antiques worth millions were displayed alongside photographs of Jae-wook's father, a man whose legend in the underground still inspired fear 10 years after his death. Sumin studied business at Seoul National University, Jae-wook said during one particularly tense moment. She graduated at the top of her class. His mother's smile never reached her eyes. How modern. Though I wonder when she'll find time for children with such ambitious interests. I understood the message clearly. My education, my mind, the things I valued about myself, none of it mattered here. I was a vessel, a means to continue the Kim family line. Nothing more. Jae-wook's sisters were different versions of the same judgment. One traditionally minded like their mother, one Western-educated but equally skeptical of my place in their family. They spoke around me rather than to me, discussing family matters in rapid-fire Korean that occasionally slipped into dialect deliberately to exclude me, though I understood more than they realized. She's too skinny to bear strong children, the elder sister murmured to her mother, and too educated to be properly obedient. I swallowed my rage with expensive wine and smiled until my face ached. On our third week of marriage, I found the files. Jae-wook was called away on urgent business, leaving me alone in the penthouse with only the security team monitoring from a distance. Boredom and restlessness led me to his home office, a space he hadn't explicitly forbidden but clearly considered private. The cabinet wasn't even locked. Perhaps he never imagined I would dare. Inside were folders labeled with my name, dozens of them dating back 3 years. Reports from private investigators. Photographs of me leaving university, shopping in Myeongdong, having coffee with friends. Detailed accounts of my daily routines, my habits, even transcripts of conversations. My hands shook as I paged through evidence of surveillance so thorough it bordered on obsession. There were copies of my academic records, financial statements, medical history, things that should have been private, protected. Notes on my favorite foods, the books I checked out from the university library, the brand of perfume I preferred. Someone had been watching me since I was 21, long before any marriage arrangement was discussed. Not someone, Jae-wook. I felt violated in ways I couldn't articulate, my privacy stripped away long before I'd ever met him. What kind of man collected such information? What kind of future had I been maneuvered into? I was still processing this discovery when the first threat came. A delivery to the penthouse, a small white box addressed to me. Inside, a traditional wedding doll with a knife through its heart, and a note in elegant handwriting. Wrong choice, wrong sister. Jae-wook's reaction was controlled fury. Within hours, we were relocated to his compound outside the city, a fortress disguised as a traditional estate. Security doubled, then tripled. I watched him transform from cold businessman to something more primal, more dangerous, the Jopik leader that Seoul's underground feared. The compound was beautiful in its isolation. A sprawling hammock surrounded by modern security disguised as traditional elements. Gardens designed for contemplation now served as buffer zones monitored by cameras. Ancient walls had been reinforced with materials that could withstand explosives. Men with military precision patrolled perimeters day and night. Who wants to hurt you? I asked as we settled into our new temporary home. His laugh was harsh. The list is long. But targeting you? That's new. That's personal. Because they know you wanted hygiene instead. They're telling you that you married the wrong sister. He went very still. Is that what you think this is about? Isn't it? Everyone knows you settled for me when you couldn't have her. For the first time, I saw genuine emotion crack through his perfect control. Not anger. Something more complex, almost like pain. You understand nothing, Sumin. Nothing at all. That night, as security patrols circled the property and Jae-wook conducted business calls in harsh whispers, I realized how little I truly knew about the man I had married. The files I'd discovered suggested an obsession that contradicted everything I thought I understood. Why would he have me followed for years if he wanted my sister? Why document my every movement, my habits, my relationships? Unless I had misunderstood everything. I lay awake in our shared bedroom, listening to Jae-wook's measured breathing beside me. We occupied the same space without touching, separated by mere centimeters that might as well have been kilometers. In the moonlight filtering through traditional paper windows, his profile was sharp and uncompromising even in sleep. The strong jaw, the straight nose, the tension that never fully left his body even in unconsciousness. What did I actually know about this man beyond his reputation? That he led one of Seoul's most powerful organizations. That his legitimate businesses generated billions annually. That he inspired both fear and loyalty in those who worked for him. That he had married me instead of my sister despite apparently preferring her. But what of the man himself? His likes, his dislikes, his history beyond business achievements? I knew nothing of substance. A deliberate distance I had maintained out of pride and hurt. On our 4th week of marriage, I decided to stop being a victim. If this was my life now, if Kim Jae-wook was my reality, then I would face it on my terms. I want to negotiate, I told him over breakfast, setting down my coffee with deliberate precision. His eyebrow raised slightly. We're already married. The contract is signed. Not that contract. Our personal terms. This marriage may have been arranged, but how we conduct it is up to us. I presented my demands clearly. Access to my own finances without oversight, involvement in legitimate business operations where my education could be useful, freedom to maintain relationships with my own family including hygiene, honesty about threats against us, and time, 6 months to determine whether this arrangement could become something sustainable. And what do I get in return? He asked, studying me with new interest. A partner instead of a prisoner. Someone who will work with you instead of against you. Someone who understands the world you operate in and won't flinch from it. The terms we agreed upon changed everything. Jae-wook assigned me to oversee the charitable foundation that bore his family name, a perfect position to legitimize illicit money while actually doing good. I restructured operations, identified inefficiencies, and began turning the foundation into something meaningful. My days gained purpose beyond waiting for my husband to return home. I had an office in his corporate headquarters, a corner suite with views of the Han River, staffed by people who reported directly to me. I reviewed grant applications, met with community leaders, directed funds toward education initiatives in neighborhoods where poverty drove young people toward gangs and crime. It wasn't the corporate career I had envisioned for myself, but it was work that utilized my skills, my education, my strategic thinking. And somewhere beneath the practicality of laundering money through charitable works, I found genuine satisfaction in making tangible differences in people's lives. I discovered that beneath the criminal empire was a man with unexpected principles. Jae-wook protected the neighborhoods where he operated. He funded medical care for families of employees. He maintained strict boundaries around certain activities. No drugs near schools, no trafficking, no harm to innocents. It wasn't redemption, but it was complexity I hadn't anticipated. Working together created a different kind of intimacy. He valued my strategic thinking. I came to respect his decisive leadership. When a rival organization attempted to move into territory he controlled, I helped identify their financial vulnerabilities. When suppliers tried to renegotiate terms, I sat beside him at meetings, presenting data that strengthened our position. We became a formidable team, and whispers spread through Seoul's underground about the cold, brilliant wife of Kim Jae-wook. The physical aspects of our marriage evolved alongside the professional partnership. What had been a power struggle became something more nuanced. Still intense, still passionate, but with moments of tenderness that neither of us acknowledged in daylight. His hands lingered longer than necessary. My body responded with increasing eagerness. We maintained our separate sides of the bed but found ourselves wrapped together by morning. I tried not to think about how those whispers would hurt Hygiene, who had cried at my wedding not from joy but from guilt, believing Jae-wook had wanted her. I tried not to wonder if she would have been happier in this life, if her gentle nature would have softened his edges in ways my sharpness could not. When we spoke by phone, carefully monitored calls for security, her voice held a wistfulness that pierced me. "Are you happy, Uni?" she asked during one such conversation. "I'm adjusting," I answered, unable to explain the complicated reality of my marriage to a sister who still believed in romance despite our family's history of arranged unions. "He's very handsome," she offered, as though that might compensate for everything. "He's very present," I replied, which wasn't a lie. Jae-wook filled every space he occupied, not just physically but energetically. His presence was something you felt before you saw him. The shift in atmosphere, the subtle straightening of subordinates' postures, the focused attention he commanded without effort. The second threat came on our second month of marriage. No doll this time. Just photographs delivered to my family home. Me entering Jae-wook's office building. Me shopping in Apgujeong. Me everywhere I'd been in the past week. All marked with red X's. When I called my father, his voice was strained. "This isn't just about you anymore, Sumin. They're watching the whole family." Fear coiled in my stomach, cold and heavy. Not for myself, somehow threats against me seemed abstract, theoretical, but for my family. For my mother, whose only crime was marrying a man with questionable business connections. For Hygiene, whose beauty had already made her a target in ways she didn't understand. That night, Jae-wook told me a truth I hadn't expected. "The Park family has been moving against us for years," he explained, pouring soju with controlled precision. "Old grievances, territorial disputes. Your father's shipping routes are valuable to them. This marriage, our marriage, created an alliance that threatened their expansion plans. The Parks were notorious even among Jopik families. Old blood, traditional values twisted into weapons, a patriarch who believed in vengeance as religion. So I'm a target because I represent that alliance? You're a target because you matter to me." The words hung between us, laden with implications neither of us was ready to acknowledge. I matter to you because I'm your wife on paper, because losing me would make you look weak. His laugh was bitter. Is that what you think? After everything, what should I think? You wanted my sister. You settled for me because tradition demanded it. Now you're stuck protecting an investment you never wanted to make. Jae-wook moved so quickly I barely registered it. Suddenly he was before me, his hands framing my face with surprising gentleness. I never wanted your sister, Sumin. The world tilted beneath my feet. I heard you, in my father's study. You said he was forcing you to take the wrong sister. I said what your father needed to hear, what protected both of us. He released me and walked to his desk, retrieving a file I hadn't seen before. Inside were more photographs, me at 21, presenting a business proposal at a university competition. Me navigating a crisis at my father's company during an internship, directing employees twice my age with confident authority. 3 years ago, I attended that competition looking for investment opportunities. Instead, I found you, the daughter of Kim Sung-ho, a potential ally with business interests that complemented mine. A woman with a strategic mind who understood power dynamics instinctively. I began watching you, learning about you, planning. The implications were staggering, reorganizing everything I thought I knew about our marriage, about Jae-wook's motivations, about my place in his world. But why the charade? Why pretend to want hygiene? His expression darkened. Because your father values beauty over intelligence. He sees women as commodities, even his daughters. Especially his daughters. If he knew I wanted you specifically, he would have questioned why. Would have wondered what leverage I thought I was gaining. Would have increased the price or denied me altogether. My fingers trembled as I touched the photographs. But my father. Your father would never have agreed if he knew I wanted you specifically. He would have been suspicious, would have questioned my motives beyond business. So I created a narrative he would understand. A man reluctantly accepting the elder daughter while preferring the younger. It made him feel he had the upper hand in negotiations. The realization was dizzying. You manipulated us all. I secured what I wanted through the only channels available. And I protected you in the process. Protected me? From what? His expression hardened further. The Park family had already identified you as valuable. As a way to gain leverage over your father's operations. They had plans for you, Sumin. Marriage to one of their sons. Or worse. I felt ill. The Parks were notorious even among Jopic families. Brutal, traditional in the worst ways, treating women as property to be used and discarded. So you swooped in to save me? Anger flared, hot and cleansing. You decided my future without my knowledge or consent, and I'm supposed to be grateful? No. His voice was quiet. You're supposed to understand that there were no good options. Only choices between different kinds of prisons. I offered the one with the most freedom, the most potential for something real. I left him standing there, needing distance to process this revelation. The man I'd married wasn't who I thought. The marriage itself wasn't what I believed. The narrative I'd constructed, unwanted bride, wrong sister, business transaction, was built on misunderstandings and deliberate deceptions. But worst of all was the realization that some part of me was relieved. Relieved that Jae-wook had wanted me. Relieved that I hadn't been second choice. What did that say about me? That I could find comfort in being the chosen prisoner? That I could feel satisfaction knowing my husband had orchestrated our union through manipulation rather than accepting it as duty? I spent the night alone in one of the compound's guest rooms, wrapped in silk bedding that felt cold without body heat beside me. I'd grown accustomed to Jae-wook's presence, the steady rhythm of his breathing, the subtle scent of his skin, the security of his strength nearby. Now, isolation gave me space to think but also highlighted how quickly I'd adapted to his constant proximity. Dawn found me in the compound's garden, watching sunrise paint ancient walls with golden light. The contrast was jarring. Serene beauty surrounding me while danger circled beyond, tradition and modernity colliding in every aspect of my new life. Jae-wook found me there, respecting my space by sitting on a stone bench several feet away. In morning light, I could see fatigue in the lines around his eyes, tension in the set of his shoulders. He hadn't slept either. "I won't apologize for wanting you," he said finally, breaking the silence. "But I regret that it had to happen this way. Through deception. Through necessary strategy." His gaze met mine directly. "The world we live in doesn't allow for simple truths or straightforward desires. You know this, you've grown up in it just as I have." He was right, though I hated admitting it. My father had been negotiating potential matches for me since I turned 18, weighing business advantages against family connections, completely disinterested in my preferences. In his world, our world, daughters were assets to be leveraged for maximum benefit. "What happens now?" I asked, the question encompassing our marriage, the threats against us, the uncertain future stretching before us. "That depends on what you want, Sumin." For the first time since I'd known him, Jae-wook's expression was completely unguarded. "Our agreement stands 6 months to determine whether this can be more than arrangement. I'll honor that, whatever you decide." The 3rd month of our marriage brought a new kind of tension. Working together had created respect. Physical attraction had always simmered beneath our interactions. But now, with truth between us, something deeper and more dangerous was forming. Understanding, perhaps even trust. Jae-wook began sharing more about his operations, bringing me into meetings where strategy was discussed openly. I started accompanying him to business functions, no longer just a decorative wife but an active participant in negotiations. We developed subtle signals, unspoken communications that allowed us to present a united front even when disagreeing privately. I found myself studying Korean corporate law to better understand the boundaries between his legitimate and illegitimate businesses. I reviewed financial statements late into the night, identifying patterns and inconsistencies, creating cleaner pathways for money to move through systems I designed. I learned the names and loyalties of captains who reported to him, memorized territories and agreements that maintained fragile peace between rival organizations. His mother noticed the change. During a family dinner, she watched our interactions with narrowed eyes before addressing me directly for the first time in weeks. "You're different, Sumin. Less resistant." I met her gaze steadily. "I'm learning to navigate this world on my terms. There are no individual terms in family business. Only family interest. Then it's fortunate that Jae-wook's interests and mine are aligning." She studied me for a long moment before nodding slightly. Not approval, acknowledgement. It felt like winning a minor battle in a very long war. That night, Jae-wook received word that one of his nightclubs had been attacked. 3 employees injured, property damaged, a message left on the wall in red paint. Family for family. He was gone before I could process what was happening. Security doubling around me as he disappeared into the night to handle the situation personally. I paced our bedroom for hours, torn between anger at being left behind and fear for his safety. When he returned near dawn, his knuckles were raw and there was a darkness in his eyes that I hadn't seen before. "It's escalating," he said simply, loosening his tie with mechanical precision. "The Parks are making their move. Tell me." He looked at me for a long moment, as if deciding how much truth I could bear. "They're targeting everyone connected to us. Employees, associates, family." Ice flooded my veins. "My family? Your father has increased security. Your mother and sister have been moved to a secure location. Hygiene is in danger because of me. Because of us." His expression softened fractionally. "She's in danger because the Parks are animals who see people as leverage. Don't take that blame on yourself." But I did. How could I not? My sister, who had never asked for any of this, who had wept at my wedding believing she had somehow failed me. Now she was hidden away, protected from threats she never should have faced. That night, something changed between Jae-wook and me. Perhaps it was shared guilt, shared responsibility. Perhaps it was the growing realization that we were truly in this together. When he reached for me in the darkness, there was tenderness beneath the passion, something almost like vulnerability in the way he whispered my name. For the first time, I allowed myself to wonder if this arranged marriage might become something real, something chosen rather than imposed. The call came at 2:37 a.m. on the first day of our 4th month of marriage. Jae-wook answered, his body tensing beside me in bed. Then he was moving, giving orders in the controlled voice that meant emergency. We need to go. Now, get dressed. Practical clothing. I knew better than to question during crisis. Within 10 minutes we were in an unmarked car, speeding through Seoul's empty streets with a security escort before and behind us. My father, I finally said, the only explanation that made sense for this level of urgency. Jae-wook's hand found mine in the darkness. He's alive. Critical but stable. The Parks bypassed his security, planted explosives in his car. If he hadn't been running late leaving the office, I closed my eyes, nausea rising. And my mother? Hygiene. Safe. Already being moved to a more secure location. Seoul at night was a different city. The neon extinguished, streets emptied of the crowds that made it vibrant, buildings looming like sentinels in darkness. We moved through it like ghosts, our convoy maintaining radio silence, security personnel scanning rooftops and side streets for potential threats. The hospital appeared ahead, its emergency entrance blazing with activity despite the hour. The hospital was locked down, Jae-wook's men supplementing my father's security at every entrance. My mother sat in the private waiting area, her usually perfect appearance disheveled, her hands trembling as she clutched a paper cup of untouched coffee. Hygiene was beside her, beautiful even in distress, her eyes widening when she saw me. For the first time in months, I was face to face with the sister who had unknowingly stood between me and understanding my own marriage. Uni, she whispered, using the familiar term for older sister as she embraced me. I was so scared they'd target you too. I held her tightly, inhaling the familiar scent of her shampoo. Jasmine, always jasmine since we were children. I'm fine. We're going to be fine. But we weren't fine. None of us were fine. My father lay in intensive care, his body broken by an explosion meant to kill. My mother and sister were now refugees, hiding from a criminal family's vendetta. And I was standing in the middle of a war I'd never asked to join. The antiseptic smell of the hospital burned my nostrils, mixing with the lingering scent of fear that clung to my family. Medical equipment beeped in rhythmic counterpoint to hushed conversations between security personnel. Doctors spoke in clipped, professional tones about injuries that seemed impossible to survive. Punctured lung, ruptured spleen, fractured skull, third-degree burns over 20% of my father's body. Jae-wook moved through the hospital with quiet authority, conferring with doctors, coordinating security, making calls that would have consequences I could only imagine. I watched him work and realized he was in his element, crisis management, protection, controlled violence when necessary. This was the man I had married, not just the businessman in expensive suits who managed legitimate enterprises. Not just the calculated strategist who had orchestrated our marriage. This was Kim Jae-wook in his truest form, the Jopik leader who commanded loyalty through respect and fear in equal measure. When we were finally allowed to see my father, I barely recognized him among the machines and monitors. Sung-ho Kim, who had built a shipping empire through sheer will and questionable connections, looked small and fragile in the hospital bed. Wires and tubes connected him to machines that beeped and hummed, keeping him tethered to life. Soo-min, he whispered when he saw me, his voice raspy from the breathing tube that had only recently been removed. I took his hand carefully, mindful of the 4-line. Save your strength, Appa. No. His fingers tightened weakly around mine. Listen. What's happening now, it's not just business. The Parks, they wanted hygiene. For the youngest son. When I refused, when you married Jae-wook instead, understanding dawned, sickening and clear. This is revenge for denying them hygiene. My father's eyes closed briefly in confirmation. They see it as losing face, a dishonor that can only be answered with blood. Did Jae-wook know? When he married me, did he know this would happen? He knew the Parks wanted a foothold in our family. He offered an alternative, an alliance that would protect both my daughters. I chose the stronger protection. My father's breathing grew labored. I chose Jae-wook because he convinced me he would burn the world to keep you safe. The monitors beeped in warning as my father's oxygen levels dropped. Nurses rushed in, ushering us out with professional urgency. In the hallway, my mother collapsed against me, her composure finally breaking as sobs racked her slender frame. Hygiene stood frozen, her eyes wide with horror as the reality of our situation fully registered. We had always known our father's business walked the line between legitimate and criminal. We had grown up with security precautions, with careful conversations around outsiders, with the understanding that certain topics remained unspoken. But this violent escalation, this direct attack, shattered the careful distance we had maintained from the darker aspects of our family's connections. I left my father's room with my mind spinning. In the hallway, Jae-wook was waiting, his face unreadable. "You knew," I said quietly. "You knew the Parks wanted my sister. You knew marrying me would provoke them." He didn't deny it. "I knew they wouldn't stop at marriage. The youngest Park son has buried 3 wives already. Accidents, they called them. I wasn't going to let Hygiene become the 4th. So you decided to start a war instead. The war was already coming, Sumin. I just chose the battlefield." His hand reached for mine, hesitant in a way I'd never seen from him. I thought I could contain it, keep it between the organizations, away from families. Pulled away. "Well, you were wrong. And now my father is paying the price for your miscalculation." Pain flashed across his features before his mask slipped back into place. Yes, I was wrong about how far they would go. I underestimated their willingness to break the unspoken rules. "That won't happen again." "What does that mean?" His eyes met mine, cold and determined. "It means the Parks have made their move. Now I make mine." Over the next 48 hours, I watched Jae-wook orchestrate a response that was breathtaking in its precision and brutality. From my father's hospital room, using phones that couldn't be traced and couriers who moved like shadows, he dismantled the Park family's operations piece by piece. Their shipping contracts disappeared overnight. Their legitimate businesses found themselves under tax investigation. Their properties suffered mysterious electrical failures, security breaches, inventory losses. Their allies suddenly became unreachable. Their employees disappeared or switched loyalties. It was like watching a master chess player execute a strategy-planned moves in advance, each action triggering cascading consequences that left the opponent increasingly boxed in. Jae-wook didn't just attack the Park's business interests. He systematically destroyed their reputation, their standing among other Jopik families, their honor in a world where face was everything. And through it all, Jae-wook never left my side except when absolutely necessary, as if my father's injuries had confirmed his worst fears, that I might be taken from him at any moment. When he made calls, his hand rested possessively on my lower back. When security briefings required his attention, he positioned himself where he could maintain visual contact with me. When we slept brief, exhausted stretches between crisis points, he held me tightly against him, as though his body could shield mine from threats. On the 3rd day, while my mother slept in a chair beside my father's bed and Hygiene had gone to find coffee, Jae-wook received a message that transformed him. Whatever the text contained made him go completely still, the kind of stillness that preceded violence. "What is it?" I asked, dreading the answer. He handed me his phone wordlessly. On the screen was an image of me entering the hospital that morning, a red target superimposed over my face. The message beneath, "Wrong sister, wrong choice, wrong family. Will correct all 3 mistakes. They're coming for me directly now. They're trying." His voice was deadly calm. "But they won't succeed. You can't know that. Look what they did to my father with all his security. Your father's security wasn't me." He moved closer, cupping my face with surprising gentleness. "Sumin, I need you to understand something. There is nothing I won't do to keep you safe. No line I won't cross. No action too extreme." I should have been frightened by the intensity in his eyes. Instead, I found myself leaning into his touch, drawing strength from his certainty. "I never asked for this," I whispered. "Any of it. I know." His thumb traced my cheekbone. "And I'm sorry for that. But I'm not sorry you're my wife. I'm not sorry I chose you." In that moment, surrounded by hospital machines and the lingering scent of antiseptic, with my family broken and enemies circling, I made a decision. If this was my life now, if Kim Jae-wook was my reality, then I would face it fully. No more resentment. No more feeling trapped. I would become what circumstances had made me, the wife of a Jopik leader, a woman with power in her own right. "What's your plan?" I asked, straightening my shoulders. Something like pride flickered in his eyes. "First, we move everyone to a secure location. Your father once he's stable enough, your mother, hygiene. And then we end the parks. Not just temporarily. Permanently." I should have been horrified. The educated, ambitious woman who had graduated with honors from Seoul National University should have recoiled from the calm way he discussed destruction. Instead, I found myself nodding. "I want to help. This isn't foundation work, Sumin. This isn't legitimate business. I know exactly what it is." I met his gaze steadily. "It's protection. It's family. And if I'm going to be your wife in truth as well as name, then I need to be part of it." The next week blurred into a carefully orchestrated campaign of destruction. From the safety of Jae-wook's most secure compound, a traditional Hanok house with modern security systems hidden behind ancient architecture, we worked together to dismantle everything the Park family had built. I discovered abilities I never knew I possessed. A talent for identifying financial weaknesses, for predicting moves and countermoves, for understanding the psychology of our opponents. Where Jae-wook was direct force, I was subtle pressure. Where he cut with a blade, I slowly tightened nooses. Together, we were devastating. The foundation gave us perfect cover. Charitable events became intelligence-gathering operations. Grant applications revealed community connections and loyalty networks. Financial records exposed hidden assets and vulnerabilities. My education, my strategic thinking, my understanding of business systems, everything I had once believed would lead me to corporate success now served a darker purpose with surprising effectiveness. I learned the language of Jae-wook's world, the honorifics that signaled position within the Jopik hierarchy, the coded phrases that conveyed messages without explicit meaning, the subtle body language that differentiated ally from threat. I studied the ancient rules that governed relationships between families, the traditions that maintained order in a world beyond conventional law. My father improved gradually, moved to the compound once doctors cleared him for transport. My mother maintained her dignity even in crisis, adapting to our temporary home with the resilience that had always defined her. And hygiene, beautiful, gentle hygiene, showed unexpected strength, helping with the foundation work I could no longer fully attend to, becoming a bridge between our family and Jae-wook's. The final confrontation came more swiftly than any of us anticipated. The Park family, desperate and cornered, launched a direct attack on the compound. They miscalculated badly. Jae-wook had been waiting for exactly this move, had planned for it, had ensured we were bait in a trap of his own design. The assault failed spectacularly, with Park forces caught between Jae-wook's security teams and local police who, coincidentally, chose that moment to investigate reports of suspicious activity. The patriarch of the Park family and his eldest son were taken into custody for attempted murder. The youngest son, the one who had wanted hygiene, disappeared. Rumors suggested he had fled to China, but the body discovered in Incheon harbor 3 days later suggested a different ending. In the aftermath, standing in the garden of the compound as police finally cleared the scene, Jae-wook approached me with an expression I'd never seen before, uncertainty. "It's over," he said simply. "The Parks are finished. Your family is safe. And us?" I asked, the question that had been building since that revelation in the hospital. "What happens to us now?" "That depends." He took my hands in his touch uncharacteristically hesitant. Our arrangement was for 6 months of evaluation, to see if this marriage could become something real, something chosen. We're 4 months in. I'm not waiting 2 more months to make a decision I've already made. His breath caught. And what decision is that? I stepped closer, close enough to feel the warmth of him, to see the flecks of amber in his dark eyes. I choose you, Kim Jae-wook, not because I have to, not because of family obligation or tradition or alliance. I choose you because somewhere between resentment and respect, between anger and understanding, I found something I wasn't looking for. What did you find? His voice was rough, vulnerable in a way I'd never heard. A partner. A man who sees me. Really sees me and values what he sees. A future I never imagined but now can't picture living without. His hands framed my face, his eyes searching mine for any hesitation, any doubt. Finding none. He kissed me with a gentleness that belied the violence he was capable of, the destruction he had wrought to keep me safe. I've wanted you since I first saw you, he confessed against my lips. Not as a business arrangement, not as an alliance. You. Brilliant, fierce, unstoppable Sumin who challenged me at every turn, who never yielded unless it was her choice to yield. I'm still going to challenge you, I warned, smiling against his mouth. I'm still going to have opinions about how things should be done. I'm counting on it. His smile transformed his face, making him look younger, lighter. My cold, brilliant wife who terrifies my associates more than I do. Why would I want that to change? 3 months later, we formally renewed our vows, not out of obligation or tradition, but as a conscious choice made by two people who had found unexpected partnership in arranged circumstances. My father, recovered enough to walk me down the aisle again, whispered his approval as he placed my hand in Jae-wook's. You found your match, he said simply. As strong as you are in different ways. The ceremony incorporated elements of tradition and modernity, just as our marriage had become a balance between worlds, the old ways of family alliances and the new reality we were creating together. I wore a modernized hanbok in crimson and gold, symbolizing both tradition and my position as the wife of a powerful man. Jae-wook watched me with undisguised pride as I moved through the ceremony with confidence I had lacked the first time. The reception was smaller than our wedding had been. Only true allies, true family. Hyejin danced with Jae-wook's younger brother, their shared laughter suggesting another potential alliance in the making. My mother and Jae-wook's engaged in serious conversation about grandchildren, both pretending the timing was entirely up to us. And in the center of it all, Jae-wook kept me close, his hand rarely leaving mine, his eyes finding me whenever duty required momentary separation. Still no regrets? He asked as we swayed together during our first dance as a truly married couple. I thought about the path that had brought us here. The anger, the pain, the misunderstandings and manipulations, the blood and fear and final clarity. I thought about the woman I had been and the woman I had become. I thought about the future we were building, complicated and powerful and entirely ours. No regrets, I told him, resting my head against his chest where I could hear the steady rhythm of his heart. Only forward. 6 weeks later, when the pregnancy test showed positive, I understood with perfect clarity that the life growing inside me was the culmination of every choice, those made for me and those I had claimed for myself. This child would be heir to empires both legitimate and shadowed, would carry the strength of both family lines, would know a father's fierce protection and a mother's strategic mind. As I placed Jae-wook's hand over my still flat stomach, watching emotion transform his face, I realized how far we had come from that day I overheard him in my father's study. The words that had once wounded me, the wrong sister, now seemed like the first step on a path that had led exactly where I was meant to be. The Korean Mafia boss had wanted my sister but married me instead. And somehow, against all expectations, we had forged something neither of us had dared hope for. A marriage of equal partners, bound by